Canadians are very excited about the upcoming election happening in the country. And we have a Conservative Party who is only just beginning to push back against the topic of immigration. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are also mad at Mark Carney, the leader of the Liberals, for saying that Canada is more European than some European nations. And it's very interesting because when you look south of the border, the Overton window has very much shifted to the right, talking about the foundation of Western countries being European and Christian. And my guest today had a very viral clip a couple of weeks ago talking about this very topic, and she embraced the label of being a xenophobic nationalist. We will introduce her in a moment, but let's watch this viral clip for those who have not seen it yet.
What's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Don't you think that's better for Americans in general?
To be xenophobic nationalism is better?
We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture. We should have assimilation.
Which, do you get to choose what the culture is?
We already have a dominant culture.
What is
based
the dominant
on
culture?
European and Christian values and identity. That is the dominant culture.
White Christian,
it's rooted in European identity.
White. So your argument is that
has been the dominant culture.
Just to be clear,
and we're not letting people assimilate to that. We're saying you should keep your culture, and this is why our culture is so divided.
Your argument is that Trump is good for those who want a dominant white European culture.
I mean, that is what America is. It's rooted in European identity and Christian values. That's what it has been. Would you really disagree with that?
Amazing. This is the one and only Sarah Stock. She formerly an employee for Rebel News and now an employee for Slightly Offensive. Without further ado, Sarah Stock, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me. I actually totally agree with you about the Overton window shifting right now in the U.S. And I'm just curious, do you think that's happening in Canada too?
Oh man, it is, but very slowly, and I feel like the biggest bulwark or the biggest obstacle to that is our. I mean, I want to ask you about this, of what you think is wrong with Canada, because you've lived some time here. But I really feel it's the cowardice of the Conservative Party that's the biggest obstacle in the way. So it is shifting. The why I'm optimistic about the right wing in Canada is Canadians started to be a little bit racist. They started to actually be, wait a minute, look at all these Indian people, they're pooping on the beaches. And to me, that is like a miracle that's actually becoming a more popular sentiment. So,
well, Canadians are naturally the least racist people in the world.
There's something about that, yeah.
I feel like if a Canadian becomes racist, it's something bad is happening. That's not even their fault at that point. They're being forced to take that position. I don't think any Canadian just wakes up and is I'm going to say some offensive things. I think they were forced into it.
I think that's profound. The fact, because you're right, we are super nice, we are super agreeable all the time, and even if we're acting racist, guys, something's wrong here. Something is wrong. But yeah, I mean, we'll talk tonight a little bit about Mark Carney and the upcoming election. I definitely want to get into that clip and why pushing this part of the conversation I think is so important. America, Canada, Western European nations, Australia, doesn't matter. This is, to me, this is the litmus test. It's if you're right wing, are you going to be opposing immigration? Are you going to be, celebrating or reminding everybody that hey, these countries actually have a foundation to them that is European and Christian? If you're denying that, if you're not actually agreeing with that, then you're not really right wing. You're not actually really helping. And yeah, in Canada, there's really not enough people who are just kind of simply stating this fact. But we'll also talk about kind of some subversive characters in the right wing as well. But are you tired of watching that clip by now? You've probably seen it dozens and dozens and dozens of times.
Yeah, I kind of just tune out now when someone plays it. I'm yeah, I've seen this a few times.
Right.
A few too many times.
Absolutely.
But
and yeah, I'm curious because you're in a room with, 24 other MAGA Republicans from that video. And I think I saw in another interview that you were yeah, I feel like I was the most extreme one with that take. Was there any sort of like response behind the scenes, like after that was filmed, that was interesting?
Oh yeah, I mean, a few of them did sort of exit interviews, and they kind of denounced what I said. And I'm not sure. I don't think those really made it to the video, or maybe one of them did. And then I'm also in a group chat with a lot of the people from the video, and I kind of called them out on it. And they were basically saying, okay, now we kind of agree with you. We just really didn't like the way you said it. So that was kind of, and I was just like, yeah, I know. I said it in like kind of a, a provocative way, but that was intentional.
And that's what's needed. That's what's necessary.
Yeah.
I've talked about this recently with people like Jordan Peterson. There's one specific video in particular he posted a few weeks ago, and it was about, we need to talk about multiculturalism in the UK. And it was about rape gangs. And it was like an hour. It was like 40 minutes. And it's like, you could have just said, Jordan Peterson, that, there's a lot of questionable, like, Muslims come from shithole countries, and they have a different culture than ours, but it had to be this like 40-minute long thing of like, being very particular with your words, very safe with your words, very, intellectual with your words.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, that doesn't have the impact with like a viral clip like this does, where it's like, okay, what's wrong with xenophobia? That's a crap hole country, like Trump said, which was very popular.
And also, like, that's kind of old news. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we all know that. Yeah. Like, does the word Islamophobia even have any weight anymore in the right wing? Like, I feel like we're kind of past that. Yeah.
I mean, it's
maybe not in Canada.
Yeah, unfortunately, those words still get pushed around a lot, and it's because no one's really actually, you ask the question: is the Overton window shifting? We have an officially state-funded media, right? That doesn't help, and we have basically every major party beholden to this state-funded media, and the whole premise of the Conservative Party acting like cowards over the past 3 years with Poilievre is, the media is going to call us names. So that's why we can't be conservative. And it's like, okay.
And it doesn't even matter because the media still calls Poilievre names. And he's never said a single thing that's controversial in his entire life.
Facts.
He's never said anything cool or based or anything. Like,
it's
what
very
he
true.
Said?
And this is the thing. I want to like him so bad. Like, I want to have a clip where I'm like, cool. He said something cool. And the closest thing we have is him like chopping on an apple. And that's it.
Yeah.
And it's
kind of lame. Who I like is Maxime Bernier.
Yeah.
I like the clip of him with those international students. Their visa ran out and they're at a Tim Hortons, and he's like, we don't need you here working at Tim Hortons. Why don't you just go back to India? He's like, your visa ran out. Why are you protesting to stay in a country that it's not even your country?
It's super simple. It's super simple to be a radical, and I feel like some people get this idea that being a radical is like being offensive or having like offensive rhetoric. And that's not always the case at all. Like sometimes being a radical is just pushing the conversation like you did in this clip, where it's just like, no, we have a, fundamentally Christian and European dominant culture. Like that's super radical, but you're not being some crazy person, like, dropping F slurs or anything like that,
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be like, not to use like, that cringe word, but it doesn't need to be like hateful either. Like I really don't hate anybody. It comes from a place of love for me. Everything I say comes from a place of love. And I think people, if anyone really listens to the clip, I think they can kind of tell that's where I'm coming from, is I like my country and I like our culture and I want to maintain that. And I like, how is that a hateful position to have? That comes from a place of love.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's too bad because some people do get caught up in like the resentment. And this is why kind of like having a sort of like Christian sort of morality really helps, because Christians, hopefully if they're doing it right, they're more aware of not being overcome with having hatred and resentment in your heart. And it doesn't seem like a big difference, but it has a huge difference. Like, the energy is certainly different. You know, when you are speaking out to defend and to because you love your country and love your people, it's certainly different than like, oh, I just want these brown people out of here. Fuck. You know,
yeah.
like it's got a different energy to it. But I don't know. You say you're not hateful, but Sarah, you are on antihate.ca. So you are officially branded bigot, xenophobe. It's totally over for you. I'm sorry to inform you like this. But this is on the front page of Antihate. What's the problem with xenophobic nationalism? Former Rebel News host asks in viral video. Have you read this trash? Have you bothered reading any of this?
Yeah, it's not very good journalism because they weren't even able to dig anything cool up about me. So it was just basically like a transcript of the video. I was hoping I would be exposed for a little bit more than that, you know?
Disappointing. Antihate, disappointing. Couldn't even dox her family members, eh? What the hell is this?
Yeah. Boring.
But yeah, I told you before we went live, I'm working on a documentary to expose Antihate and the smear merchants in Canada. It's very similar to the SBLC in America, or the ADL for that matter. And because I feel like this is another thing that just kind of we've talked about it already. I'm sure we'll bring it up again. Just this sort of passiveness, meekness, this sort of afraid to ruffle the feathers sort of attitude in Canada. And the anti-hate network does not, or the hate experts doesn't make it any easier, because anytime somebody does speak up, this anti-hate article comes up, and then the article gets shared around, and these gullible Canadians everywhere say, oh, well, I got sent this anti-hate article, and apparently this person's a piece of shit because of this little link that I got. And it actually has a really, really horrible effect on people's livelihoods and reputations. And it affects all sorts of things. Like, there's the comedians, the danger cats. There's like any sort of right-wing activist who's being effective gets listed there. And even yourself, it's like, oh, viral clip talking about, Canada being foundationally, or I guess America being foundationally like Christian and European. We got to put her on the front page, make her life harder. Has this article, I was going to ask if this article's come up at all. Like, has anyone shared it with you and been like, oh my God?
It actually hasn't, but honestly, thankfully, I'm just in a unique position where obviously I'm an American citizen and I live here and I'm going to stay here. So I don't really have to worry about that, I don't know, ruining anything about my life. Like, I work for someone who holds the same views as me, so I'm not going to get fired. And, all of my friends back home, they already know my views. Like, I used to work for Rebel News, but I'm just really vocal on social media already. So I don't know. It just hasn't really sabotaged anything with my life. But also, I understand that for a lot of other people, they don't really have the same benefits as I do. A lot of people are stuck in Canada. They might get fired from their job because of an article like that. They might lose friends or family members even, just because of the culture that's in Canada right now. So I obviously have a lot of sympathy for those people, and it's kind of disgusting that our government funds that website. They fund that journalism to smear Canadian citizens over things that are not illegal, by the way. Is that illegal? Is that breaking some hate speech law, what I said about xenophobic nationalism?
So no, it's weird because they have these hate speech laws that are on the books, but they hardly ever enforce them. Probably because it would draw attention to how absurd the law is. Because the law, as it states, is like, fomenting hatred against a specific group, and it's like, okay, talking about decolonization, like obviously it doesn't apply to hating on white people. You can publish as many books as you want about that, but no, they haven't. I think there's only a few cases where it's been enforced. But no, it's not illegal. And a lot of the time, the stuff that Antihate posts is like reaching. It's not necessarily even honest. And worst of all is they completely ignore far left violence, far left hatred, far left, like everything. So to say that they're like an expert on hate is absurd. They're clearly just like, aligned with Antifa. So, Yeah, but let's get a little bit into that. Like, what the heck is wrong with Canada? Since you were born in Canada, that's right, and you're moving to
Yeah.
America. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Did you want to share anything about your time at Rebel News, or why you left, or if you were fired?
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a great time working for Rebel News. I started for them as an intern right out of high school. And a lot of people don't realize like I worked behind the scenes for them for a long time. I worked for them for 2.5, almost 3 years. But yeah, I mean, I just started to get a few different views than them on certain issues. And so I guess we can say like we grew apart. And so as of Christmas Day, I stopped working for them actually.
Symbolic.
Yes.
And really, so it did kind of have to do with your political views and it just not aligning.
Yeah. I mean, because I before that I got along with everyone. I think I did good work for them. They liked my work. I liked them, but we just didn't have the same views on certain things.
Well, hey, the last interview I did was with Mocha Bezirgan, who is also a former Rebel News employee, and he's doing great work independently. And I'm also a big fan of Elijah, of course, and Slightly Offensive. And you've already written some good articles for them. Is there any article in particular that you like the most that you've written for them so far?
I would say just like the pinned article I have on my Twitter.
Okay.
Just about some of these issues that just kind of like a zoom out perspective of the past few years, especially leading up to the U.S. election. Just about like all these issues that conservatives just completely gave up on. Like we had Melania Trump coming out as pro-choice right before the election, and no one wants to talk about that. It's like, so, you know, our president's family won't even
You mean pro-trans?
stand against abortion. No, pro-choice.
Pro-choice.
Yeah. So it's like, what does it even mean to be a conservative anymore? I mean, this is why I don't even like to call myself a conservative anymore. Because we're just conserving things from like 5 years ago that liberals believed.
Yeah. No, it's pretty straightforward, and it's so sad because I compare it to Canadian conservatives, and they will say on all of these issues, no, that's a dead issue. We can't fight back on that. We can't fight back on abortion. Can't fight back on gay marriage. Can't fight back on anything. But yeah, go and check that out. That's pinned on your Twitter. Very cool. Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to get into some more of the Canadian politics stuff and like what's happening in the election. But before we do that, it might make more sense to, if you have any sort of diagnoses of what the heck is wrong with this country, what the heck is wrong with conservatism here. Like, you can talk about the Conservative Party. You can talk about, I don't know, just growing up, like anything, because I'm always trying to solve this Rubik's Cube of like what exactly is wrong with some of the people here in terms of just not being stronger conservatives.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is, I feel like a big part of it is there's less of like a Christian cultural dominance in Canada. I would say that, because I think a lot of the social conservatives in America are Christians. Like if you look at the pro-life movement in America, like the staunch conservative pro-lifers, most of them are Catholics. And they're like hardcore practicing Catholics. And then even social conservatives on other issues, like against transgender stuff or whatever, or pro-Trump people or whatever, most of those are evangelicals. So I think that's like a big part of it, honestly. And then because of that, because that's like such a pervasive cultural element in America, it's also just like more normal to be conservative. So it's more okay to be conservative here. But in Canada, it's like, I mean, that's like embarrassing or something if you say you're conservative. So you're not, I don't know, like you can't go to, like if you go to high school and you're like a proud Trump supporter in Canada, you know, even though that's not like, I don't, but like some people do support Trump in Canada, which is like kind of weird, but there are people like that. But if you do that, you'd be like kind of like kicked out of the friend group, I think. I don't know, depending.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people in politics have lost, especially in the right wing, have sort of lost track of the social dynamics of politics and how important they are. Like to use a sort of, kind of like cheap example, it's not like a popularity contest. It kind of is a popularity contest.
Yeah.
Like, appearing cool and being like a confident, charismatic leader that doesn't just speak to, policies, but actually speaks to like you as a human being. Like that is the most powerful thing. And it's almost an interesting contrast of if it were a high school scenario and you're a young right-wing person, like, would it be cooler to have a MAGA hat on or to be like some nerd with glasses who likes Polyev? Well, actually, I swear I'm not right. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like this nerdy version of conservatism that's not even really cool. It's not even really like strong or masculine.
Yeah.
Zero aura. And I said earlier, like, I really want to like Polyev, but like so many of his clips, I'm just like, dude, I can't work with this. I can't clip this. Like, this is just, like there's a recent clip. Actually, maybe we can play it. It's kind of long, but since this election, have you been following Canadian politics closely since like the new year?
I not super closely. I've been following it a little bit, just this past week, because I know we're kicking off an election now, but not super closely. I'll say that.
Yeah, you're like that's behind me now. That's a past chapter now. We're moving on. I mean, I can appreciate that. Some days I wake up and look at the Twitter feed in Canada and I'm like, oh my God, I now understand why people are leaving. But no, to give you kind of just a quick Cole's notes, essentially for 3 years we've had Polyev leading the Conservative Party. Okay. And he's been kind of been a huge pussy, quite frankly. I've been calling this out. I've been yapping about it for 3 years. And a lot of these people in the Conservative Party sphere were like, oh, that's, Greg, you're going too far. That's actually racist. He needs to be a pussy in order to win. And I even had a tweet from 2023 that said, if Mark Carney shows up and sells the same basic bitch fiscal conservatism, then Polyev's going to become irrelevant overnight.
Yeah.
Trudeau resigned. Carney showed up, and that's exactly what happened. And now he's calling an election because he's got the momentum. Polyev does not. And it's just so sad to watch because all these conservatives are like, well, yeah, but we're going to keep using this be a pussy strategy, and that's going to help us win. And I'm honestly just like lost. I'm like, I don't even know what to say to you guys.
Yeah, Polyev is saying we need a carbon tax election. I'm like, dude, like, I think we need like a immigration election. Like, I think if you like walk out into the street in Canada, you're not like, oh, look at all these carbon taxes. You're like, where am I?
I live in Toronto, so I can confirm that's totally. Look at all these carbon taxes everywhere. Man, these carbon taxes smell. Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is we're getting like, I think you had a great soundbite earlier where I don't think Polyev has said anything controversial in his life. And
Never.
This just, and
this, it's because he's a career politician too. So people like that just have no aura in general. Cause like, he's just been like climbing the ladder, trying to be prime minister his whole life. He's like a career nerd, basically. He hasn't done anything cool.
I feel it's at the point, like I used to like hate on him for a while, but over the past few months, I see him at the podium, like drinking water. He's like, I feel bad for him. It's like, man, this guy's not like, he's not keeping up with this. He's not even like a prime minister yet. Like, I don't even know if he has the longevity to do this. Even if he did.
I don't know. I think the one thing, like, I think best case scenario is that Polyev wins because obviously like Maxime Bernier just won't win, sadly. But best case scenario is he wins, but the PPC gets a lot of seats. And then hopefully they'll actually be able to kind of sway the dialogue on some issues. That's what I'm hoping for.
That would be great. And I think that there's some Alberta candidates and there's even some in sort of rural Ontario that they have a really good ground game. And like they're really knocking a lot of doors. They're really like, showing up. In particular, I'll shout out a few of them. Jason Levine is somebody who's doing a lot of good stuff. Tish Conlon in Ontario, and Peter Taras as well. I think he got like 9% of the vote in the last election, which is a pretty big deal. Like that's a pretty big deal for a PPC candidate. Clearly they have a strong ground game. But yeah, I mean, another reason it's just so, I don't know, demoralizing is the liberals have just so much better propaganda. Like it's not even close. Like they got Mike Myers there, and it's don't get me wrong, it's totally stupid. It's a total brain dead, wear a hockey jersey form of nationalism of like, hey, did you see the hockey game? Hey, remember Mr. Dress Up?
But they also both look Canadian. So it's, you know what I mean? Like they're kind of doing a good job with that.
Oh no, that's what I mean. Like they're
if that was like the CPC ad, they would be wearing hockey jerseys, but then they would need them all to be wearing their like diversity, like like maybe like a turban on someone or like a flamboyant sweater on someone else and like a foreign flag. So like they're gonna need to like overcompensate to make sure it's like not too nationalistic or something.
Yeah, and I totally feel that. And even in this clip here, they're referring to specific characters in Mr. Dress Up. And guess what, conservatives? This is going to be alienating to immigrants who have not lived here. This is literally dog whistling to white people, talking about Mr. Dress Up. Like if somebody just got here from India, they're gonna have no effing clue what they're talking about. And that's what's so interesting right now about their messaging. Is like, the term like throwing red meat to the base.
Yeah.
When a politician throws red meat to the base, that's like saying something that's going to get their base really excited. The problem is that Carney is throwing red meat to like the right wing, like the far right, who want their identity to actually be European. So like the whole thing is such a mess. I'll play this clip. So this is Mark Carney. This is Brian Lilly, a right wing pundit for Sun Media or Sun News. No, Mark Carney, we aren't European. We are Canadian. Let's play the clip and then we'll talk about it.
Mark Carney wants to make all of Canada European, just like, well, he is. Did you see Carney speaking with Emmanuel Macron, France's president, on his trip to Paris? There he is, declaring Canada as a European country.
With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries.
Now, this isn't surprising because Carney has described himself as a European in the past.
As a European,
I mean, would you describe yourself as a European?
Well, I mean, I kind of honestly, like, I see both perspectives on this because I think some Americans, like, even like strong, like American nationalists would be like, we're not European because we rebelled against them, So I think he's trying to do that same thing. Like Brian Lilly's trying to do that. It's like, yeah, but you guys didn't really like rebel. Like you're still under the crown, it's Canada. So you kind of are European. And also there's a whole province where everyone still speaks French.
Yeah.
There's still like, there were like government funded, or there still are government funded Catholic schools because of deals we had to make. So there's definitely a lot of like, there's still actual European influence in Canada. So what Mark Carney said is like completely true.
Yeah, exactly. And it's weird that it's like the right wing people who are like this guy, like Brian Lilly, who are seething about it. Let's actually see. Let's see what he says at the end here.
Now, that's due to his Irish passport, the thing that he says he's going to get rid of, renounce his Irish citizenship, renounce his British citizenship, says you'll only have one passport. I don't know, maybe he's in Britain to renew his passport this week. But Mark Carney is trying to adjust what Canada is and defining Canadians now as European, as opposed to how Justin Trudeau did it as not American. How about this? We're Canadian.
How about this? We're Canadian. I mean... Have you seen the clips from, we're going to play this next. Have you seen the clips from Pierre Poilievre where he says anyone from anywhere can do anything? and our nationalism is not based on bloodline, background, or birthplace. Have you seen this yet?
So what's it based on?
I don't know. I have a good question. I have no idea. No one seems to know. But have you seen these clips? It's outrageous.
I don't think so. Show me it.
Okay, there is subtitles for you. This was at his Canada First rally from I think like a month ago now. Yeah, mid-February, where he was like trying to rebrand to be like more nationalistic.
Yeah.
And here's a compilation of all like the post-national slop that he was spoon-feeding his base. Ready?
Ours is a nationalism not based on bloodlines, birthplace, or background. Whether your name is Martin or Muhammad, Polyev or Patel, that anyone from anywhere can do anything. We will treat all our people, regardless of their race, as Canadian and Canadian first with no hyphens. We are all Canadians and Canadians first. What binds us together is the Canadian promise that anyone from anywhere can do anything, whether your name is Martin or Muhammad.
You get the idea.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, so glad I'm not in Canada anymore.
I mean, come on, that sounds like that would be like a liberal speech. Like actually, like a Canadian liberal speech, which says a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's really cringy.
It's like they've switched roles, you know. It's like Polyev is the more liberal one. And I had to play that clip because Brian Lilly is like, he's trying to transform who we are. It's like, well, compared to Polyev, that clip from Polyev, anyone from anywhere can do anything. Any criminal can break into any house in the GTA and do anything. You know, like it's almost worse.
How is that any different from Trudeau saying that Canada's a post-national state? Like what Polyev said, like what argument does he even have against that? Because is he not just saying the exact same thing?
He doesn't at all. But folks, for those watching, if you have a question for Sarah Stock, please send in a super chat. Absolutely. And this is why it's so frustrating, because you see all these people rightfully terrified of Carney. He's obviously a big globalist. He's obviously, you know, rubbing shoulders with all sorts of people. Who knows what his actual plans are? And he's got the, you know, liberal mass media in his back pocket. So like, who knows what he's going to do to, pillage the country. I don't want him as leader either, but
yeah, everyone's
kind of coming to fight for Polyev. And it's like, I get it, but this guy just sucks, man. Like this guy's not like, even with his propaganda, even with his messaging, it's like, I don't even know if he can really like gain back any ground at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. He just needs to take he needs to switch it up a little bit and take a bit of a firmer stance on things like immigration. I mean, his immigration, I think I saw a tweet of yours, maybe, I think it was like today or yesterday, where you're pointing out that his only stance on immigration is like opposing the Century Initiative.
Yeah,
right?
Pretty much.
And it's like, okay, so you're only taking an oppositional stance to something that's like extremely insane. But you're not going to, so Polyev, how many people do you think Canada should have in 100 years?
Yeah.
You know, like what would he say to that?
Well, the last clip, shout out to Daniel Tyree, who clips this stuff and is on top of it. He's a remigrationist, aka mass deportationist. But I guess the last interview clip was him saying $250K a year. Let's do the math on that. Would that get us to 100K by, by 2100? If we kept at that pace?
I can't do that good math in my head, but I would say, if I'm going to estimate, I'm going to guess right now before we calculate it and say that's going to take us like 70K.
Okay, so if we went at
60K.
If we went at Polyev's rate, it would be around 60K. So I mean, it's not. How many houses is that? Think of how many houses is that. It's nuts. How many slums is that?
It's just like, why? Why do we even need more people at all? Why do we need, like, seriously, like, why do we need more immigrants? Why? We've taken in so many, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the brain dead liberal argument is, well, look at all of this land. Look how much space there is. And it's like, yeah, the majority of people live within like 100 kilometers of the border, like on this like thin line at the south of the country. And also, yeah, I mean, what's so frustrating, having followed Poilievre so closely over the past 3 years, like he made this housing crisis video. He made a housing crisis video a year and a half ago or so. And it was like, this is how Trudeau's ruining the housing market, blah, blah, blah. It's like 15-minute video, super nerdy. Look at all these charts. Look at all these graphs. Look at all these numbers. And guess what topic, guess what number does not come up this entire time? Immigration.
Immigrants. Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of immigrants coming into the country does not even factor into the housing crisis at all. But since Carney showed up, since he's tanked in the polls, all of a sudden he's like, hey, did you know that immigration levels are connected to the housing crisis? And it's like, yeah, it's
really,
it just seems like intentional stupidity and intentional, yeah. But so there is a clip I wanted to play. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it, unfortunately, but I'll just spell it out for you because I feel like it's kind of emblematic of a similar issue we were talking about in terms of the Canadian disposition towards politics. And I was at the trucker convoy, and I was there on camera, kind of recording people, interviewing people. And there was this march happening. It was one of the early days, and I don't know. Maybe people might find this kind of cringe. I was vibing. I was having a good time, and I was like, "Hey, man!" to this like other young guy marching. I'm like, "Do you want to say the N-word with me? Nationalism, nationalism." And he was like, "I'm all about peace and love, baby." And I was like, man, why are there so many hippies? Like there's so many hippies. I guess it's related to the sort of lack of Christian faith in the country, but it's kind of been replaced by this like easygoing hippie sort of vibey. Hey man, yo bro, just chill, man. Yo, just chill.
Yeah, I mean, I think Canada needs more kind of like, I hate this word, but like thought leaders. You know what I mean? Because like American politics were kind of dead before Trump too. Like think about like I feel like we take for granted now. People even hate on Trump now. Like I kind of hate on Trump now sometimes too. But like before him, it was all neocons, right? Like the people we hate now, like Dan Crenshaw, that was like everyone before Trump came along. And just like one man was like basically powerful enough to kind of change the whole political dynamic. And Canada just doesn't really have that. And they don't even have really any, they don't have anyone doing that. Not even like a political leader, but anyone like in the media who's like big enough, who's made that impact. And I think that's kind of a big problem because a lot of people would agree with what me and you are saying. Like I would say like a huge number of people would agree with it. Most Canadians, I'll say like native Canadians, are completely fed up with mass immigration. But everyone's too scared to say it. And I think that's just because no one really is saying it in like in the public arena, right? And no one's saying the things that are so controversial to say that other people could just like casually start saying that too.
Right. And it's not even controversial. Sometimes it's just like a factual reflection of the truth that is just deemed controversial in the sort of landscape,
but
right?
It's controversial in Canada. But I mean, I think people still like, everyone still talks about it like at home and everything and like with their friends.
Yeah. And there's even been, I know it's like, studies, there's been studies, but there has been studies actually that I think there was one that said 60% of Canadians support stopping mass immigration or even supporting deportations, mass deportations.
Yeah.
And still for some reason, our political class is like afraid to say anything about this.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. Maybe they're all part of the Century Initiative. But let's talk about the flip side, because in the States, there's kind of an interesting phenomena where, of course, you might have the SPLC or whoever call you a xenophobe or call you a horrible person. But speaking of thought leaders, it appears that there's kind of thought leaders attacking the right wing from a different angle of saying you are, I can bring it up, but there was this big sort of think piece about Christ is King. And it was like, it was signed by Jordan Peterson as you need to look out for these Christ is King stuff. You're probably more familiar with this, but you know, this isn't a one-off. There's kind of like various kind of efforts to sort of, what would you say, discredit or smear people who are like too Christian, too European centric in their thought of America.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure you know, like the Christ is King debate kind of went on for a year, but it's totally random. I think that it got brought up again like a year after the whole Candace Owens Daily Wire situation. I was like,
well, I mean,
I'm sorry.
It's
Why
during
are we
Easter.
doing...
It's during Lent.
Yeah.
Right? That's probably why.
Well,
but.
Yeah, but I'm like, okay, why are we doing a study on this? You know, like what? It was really dumb. But yeah, like the fact that Jordan Peterson would collaborate with a bunch of people who aren't Christians, and he's not a Christian himself, to try to say that, you know, this is like an anti-Semitic dog whistle and stuff. And I think what always happens is like the people defending this hit piece from the right are trying to say, oh, well, it is true that some people have used Christ as King to say like, oh, Christ is King, you dirty Jew, or something like that. And it's like, oh, they did use it in an anti-Semitic way or something. And it's like, okay, so like some Anon account said something, you know, like, I don't think, why does that matter? Like, why do you need to do a study on that?
I love how that's like
I just feel like, I'm just like, okay, so like, why are we siding with, like, how are you as a right-wing Christian gonna side with like basically the ADL in some hit piece against Christians? Like, maybe you don't have to like think that hard about this. Maybe just like look at it and be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna take the side of the people saying Christ is King here.
Yeah, it certainly does not seem organic, and that's certainly, having like looked at the behavior of anti-hate and how people can get smeared and have their reputations destroyed. There's always like this sort of muddying of, there's all these different techniques. But like one thing they like to do is they like to muddy the waters. So they'll take a valid criticism of Israel, for example, and they'll say, actually, no, you hate all Jews. And it's like, actually, no, you're with these like terrorists. And it's like, what? Like, no, like you're completely smearing, muddying the waters between valid criticism and like, you know, genuine hatred. And then the other thing that they love to do, they, as in like the smear merchants, is they love to, like you just said, they'll take an Anon account. They'll be like, look, Sarah, look what it says in your I've actually had friends who are Jewish reach out to me and they say, look what's in your comment section. And I'm like, well, I don't control the comment section. Like, what do you mean?
People try to act like I agree with everything people in my comment section say. I'm like, honestly, like I hate half the people in my comments, okay? Because some of them are really stupid. You can't delete people's replies on Twitter. So what do you want me to do about it?
No, it's an absurd like extrapolation of like your power and responsibility. It's like you're responsible for everything everyone says that's in your, like, it's just totally absurd. Like it doesn't make any sense. And also to go the extra conspiratorial step further, it's like that could totally be fabricated to make you look bad. Yeah. To make anybody look bad. Yeah. And it's like, that's why we need to have speech laws, because of all of these Anon accounts. That's why we're going to censor everybody. Very cool. Very cool. And And then sometimes it's a very sort of, there's different types of attacks where it's like maybe it's a think piece. It's these thought leaders trying to construct a very intellectual reason of like why you're a morally bad person and, you know, why Christ is king is bad. And then you have tweets like this where it's just like people calling you a hoe and saying this person just sucks. This, you know, it's kind of just like almost just like the social dynamic smear of like that person's a loser, she's a hoe. What were your thoughts when you first saw this, James Lindsay? This explains. There's a lot to unpack here. But what was your first thoughts when you saw this?
My very first thought is like, who spells hoe like that in 2025? This is like such a boomer way to spell hoe. Like it's supposed to be with an E. But yeah, I mean, I just laughed because I'm like, I've seen this guy speak at like Turning Point conferences and stuff, and he's supposed to be like this like highly respected guy who's capable of having all these intellectual debates, you know, and goes on all these shows and blah blah blah. And it's like he's just like calling me a hoe because he disagrees with my perspective on. We were talking about like this very like deep topic of like Christianity and liberty, and like having this like little debate, you know. I wasn't calling him any names. He's like, this explains this hoe.
Well,
I don't know. It just made me laugh.
Yeah, and the caption too of the clip that he attacked you on is, "Hey, are white people allowed to have their own interests?" And he's like, "This explains this hoe." It's like, why does that piss you off so much? Like that's like white people being able to advocate for their own interests. It's crazy how that triggered him so bad. You know?
I know, and I don't even know. Like, did he watch the clip and see what I was talking about? I'm not sure, but I guess that whole idea triggers him. But I mean, James Lindsay is like, he's one of many people who really should be voting Democrat. You know what I mean? Like, I think we let a few too many of them into the Republican Party. That's just my personal opinion. When we opened up, you know, we made this big tent, and it's like, okay, you know, it was like cool, like whatever. We got like men out of women's sports and all this stuff. It's like, okay, deep down, you're like a huge liberal. And well, not even deep down, but just obviously on the surface. People like him, they're huge liberals. And it's like, honestly, I would just appreciate it. No offense, but go back to the Democratic Party. And how about you just try to shift your own party further to the right? And I'll appreciate that. Instead of you coming into my party and trying to pull us back to the left. Like, that actually just kind of pisses me off.
Yeah. And I just wish there were more people like you in Canada, because I feel like the amount of people who are, I call it like the CPC plantation, like the Conservative Party plantation, the amount of people who are like off of it, they're in very short supply. Like it's literally like a handful or two of people who are actually dissenting against this pussy Conservative Party. But while we're ragging on James Lindsay, I thought I use this as an example of kind of what we were talking about a second ago, which is there's this very interesting political comic talking about Israel, and the JFK's files came out. There were certain connections that might have the JFK assassination connected to Mossad and Israel. And so there's this comic saying, okay, Israel was like a little small dog when it first became a country. And then Kennedy here, the dog's getting bigger. And then now it's like this massive beast. And if you look at the amount of money that goes through AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, the whole point is this is an interesting political commentary. Like, it's an interesting comic. That's what political comics do. They create commentary for people to think, oh, interesting. That's an interesting comment. But what does James Lindsay say? More casual American Nazi propaganda from a large account, popular with people in MAGA who aren't discerning enough to know an obvious enemy. So this is Nazi propaganda now, this political commentary. Okay. Exactly. Can we calm down a bit, James? Like, can we allow political commentary anymore? Comics, we're all just Nazis, I guess. It's just exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously talking about like this the state of Israel having too much control over American politics, which I feel like, is that even controversial to say anymore? I feel like everyone kind of agrees on that now. Like, it's maybe if not, maybe if you work for the GOP, you can't say that because you don't want to get fired. But I think everyone knows, everyone's a little bit sick and tired of it. So I don't think that's Nazi propaganda. You don't have to be a member of the National Socialist Party of Germany that doesn't exist anymore to see like this obvious problem, like strictly American problem, not strictly American, but American issue.
Yeah, and you could look at it from the analytical numbers standpoint, where there is a huge amount of money from AIPAC, the Israel lobby, that goes into the pockets of politicians. You could look at it from the money standpoint, but it also is permeating the mainstream conversation. We have these two, Andrew Schulz and Theo Vaughn. I'll play this clip quickly, but essentially it comes up like verbatim what we're talking about.
We value freedom. Like, I don't think we would ever accept being controlled by another country. And I think that the majority of us would rather die before that happens.
Right.
I think
we just don't know that it's happening.
Oh, here you go again. Theo, here you go. Theo, what country are you talking about? Theo. Candace, see what you started, Candace. Theo, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so it's like, I don't think any American would like to be controlled by a foreign country. And then Theo's like, oh, well, maybe it's already happening. And Andrew Schulz is like, oh, no, this is your fault, Candace Owens. So it's like there's the whole thing in a nutshell. But yeah, and it's like, part of me is jealous. It's because it just feels like America is so far ahead on this conversation. And I look at Canada and like, we're still just trying to rub two sticks together. We're trying to like the most basic principles of conserving anything is just, it's like pulling teeth up here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully that'll change, if the PPC gets some seats, like, I kind of like, I only really think that the PPC is the party that could really push any change. I don't think the Conservative Party is going to do anything. Especially just on issues like that, like multiculturalism and national sovereignty. I don't think the CPC is going to do anything about that.
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts on sort of the like strategy and approach? Because I've tried to explain this to people of how by supporting the PPC, you actually are forcing the Conservative Party to react and to move. And a lot of people don't understand this. And they're like, no, I'm just going to bite my tongue. I'm going to shut up. I don't like what Poilievre is doing, but I'm still going to like support him anyway. So do you have any thoughts on like the importance of being like a radical or to like push the Overton window?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. That's what a lot of people are doing in the U.S. I think, the U.S. is different because it's just like a much bigger political landscape. So there's so many different factions of the right wing and left wing and everything. But yeah, I think that's important in Canada. Like, I mean, I would vote for the PPC personally. And sorry, I just like lost my train of thought real quick.
Yeah, I was talking about the importance of like pushing the envelope and supporting more radical voices, and how like you said earlier in the conversation, it's like we just need more people who have a platform publicly opposing immigration. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, guys. Like, it really doesn't have to be anything extreme.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to like be on a half pipe with a skateboard. Like, you literally just need to be like, yeah, there's people are going to be here illegally and they have to be deported. So,
okay. I remember. So one other thing I was going to say though, I don't think the only solution needs to just be like, okay, vote for the PPC. I think also we should just try to reform the CPC from the inside as well. So if there are people who maybe hold similar views to the PPC, but maybe they don't have a public record of doing or saying anything crazy, maybe they could run for the CPC. You know what I mean? Like maybe they could be a little bit more of a further right CPC, kind of play it safe, get in power, and try to shift the narrative a bit more. And I think, I think you can do it both ways, and I think both ways are important. I mean, Canada's reformed its Conservative Party before, so it can happen again.
It has, and I like what you're saying, but I've talked to so many Conservative Party people who have like been kicked out for just beginning to like speak out a little too much, and they just get the boot.
That's
right
true.
away.
Yeah.
So
they do gatekeep a lot.
Yeah, but and I guess like the detrimental thing of the infiltration is it's just more people receiving lip service and then not saying anything because they're like, oh no, they're gonna be based soon. Sarah, don't worry. Once they get voted in, once they get all the power, once they get all sorts of lobbyists speaking in their ear, then they're gonna actually oppose immigration. Is that how it works? So we're gonna wait for 4 years to not talk about immigration. That's the strategy, to shut our mouths for 4 years. Okay. Good plan. All right. But, hey, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or promote, anything in the future that you're excited about for your career?
I don't really have anything off the top of my head right now. I'm going to be writing more articles soon, have a few more interviews coming up, and I mean, I have plans, but I'm not going to share them quite yet.
Nice.
But fair
enough.
Thanks so much for this interview. I think it's a very good talk, and I'm excited for the future in the US and hopeful for the future in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, thank you. Every time there is a, good looking Aryan woman just stating the facts, it's always great to see. And, I mean, isn't it crazy how just you stating a few facts like that in a Jubilee video can just go so viral, and you see like hundreds of people you don't know giving their own take and reaction to it in like one way or another.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Well, that's kind of what I was saying about Canada just needs someone to do that for Canadian issues, right? Like, I think people just need someone who's bold and confident enough to say what they're already thinking. Also someone who actually has like good optics, so they don't look like they're crazy or ugly or anything like that. And then they feel like they're okay to say the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Like, there is a lot about that sort of social dynamic of being someone who looks approachable and who you'd want to associate with. And speaking of that, that's sort of a goal for the documentary that I'm working on, The Hate Network. It's going to be, talking about the Canadian Antihate Network. And if you want to support it, you can go to givesendgo.com/savefreespeech. But the whole point is basically is to say, hey, there's a whole system to discredit you and smear your reputation, and you should not be afraid of these people. Like this is literally like far left Antifa freaks who are trying to ruin your life. And like the more we're afraid of them, the more we will never actually accomplish anything. Because if we let them dictate what we're allowed to say, where we're allowed to go, it's like we're not going to be able to advance anything. So, but if you want to check that out, it's givesendgo.com/savefreespeech. I'll put it in the chat. And of course, make sure you follow Sarah Stock on X or Twitter. Sarah C. Stock is her @ in the corner there. And of course, people can check you out at, slightlyoffensive.com. Yeah, slightlyoffensive.com. Amazing. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. We will wrap it up there. And until next time, we will talk to you soon. We'll play. Bye. Thank you so much. Yeah, no problem. We'll play this clip on the way out. Okay. For Americans in general. Like xenophobic nationalism is better. We should have a coherent culture. Everyone should be a part of the same culture. We should have assimilation. Which, do you get to choose what the culture is? We already have a dominant culture. What is based the dominant on European culture? And Christian values and identity. That is the dominant culture. White Christian, it's rooted in European identity. White. So your argument is that has been the dominant culture. Just to be clear, and we're not letting people assimilate to that. We're saying you should keep your culture, and this is why our culture is so divided. Your argument is that Trump is good for those who want a dominant